Hey y'all, how's everybody doing? This is Betty Hovey, and welcome to another Healthcare Happenings. I am pleased to be just joined by my guest. Don is it's Don Self, and he has been in the industry for 37 years doing reimbursement consulting. And coding consultations. He has been an expert, given expert testimony in federal and state courts. And our subject matter today, which is Erisa, is something that he is an expert on and will be talking to us about, which I think is just a fascinating subject. And I think more physician practices need to understand Erisa so that they can fight denials better and bring in more appropriate payments to the practice that you're due. And that's what this is all about, is making sure our physicians and other providers get paid for the work that they're doing. He is an author and has written some books on geriatrics in Geriatric Magazine and on Erisa. He also has a website, and I'll put the website address up along with his email address as we talk later. But he's given seminars to the AOA, to MGMA. He's spoken to many, many AAPC local chapters. He's also speaking to AHIMA and many others. He has done more than 950 webinars and seminars, which is something that you got to try to wrap your mind around there. So that is a whole bunch. I don't know how many I've done. I've done quite a few myself. So we might be in there going head to head on that number. But he is the CEO of Don Self and Associates, and is the president also of Telecare USA. But I wanted to also have you tell everybody a little bit more about yourself. Like, I gave you the introduction of being 37 years, in healthcare, but, and that you do reimbursement consulting, right?
Yes,
so,
ma'am. I have been doing this 37 years. I'm not going to tell you how many years I've been doing it right, but I've been doing this 37 years. Okay.
And what kind of got your interest in the field in this area?
I was selling super bills and pegboard systems for a company called Control Effects and MyFax, and One Right pegboard systems with the ledger cards, day sheets, and all like that, and super bills. And I'd had doctors order super bills from me and say, "Hey, I want 5,000 super bills of this one, or 10,000 of that one." And this is Sassy, by the way. She helps me do interviews.
Hi, Sassy.
And doctors would say, "I want that," and use the same codes as on there before. And I started thinking, well, some of these codes are changing. I've heard from other clients. And so I decided to attend a seminar about how the codes change, taught by Medicare. And I thought, I can do a better job than that, because all he's doing is confusing everyone. And I started doing that back in '85. And since then, God has blessed me with the business the way I've got now.
Oh, that's wonderful. So what is your what's your background prior that, kind of got you? Was it sales basically?
Sales,
Okay.
put systems and all like that. And I just really wanted to take a chance. So I told my wife I'm leaving the pegboard sales company and going to go off on my own and hang out as a shingle and be a consultant. And she said, "But you're making good money." At that time, I was making about 35,000 a year. And she said, "You sure you can do this?" I said, "Why not?" And she said, "Anybody else doing it in the country?" I said, "There's got to be somebody else doing this out there." So she trusted in me, and my first desk was a door laid on two boxes in my dining room with a vented typewriter, and that's kind of how we got started.
Cool. And I had Pam Vanderbilt. She's also another perpetual listener here. She was thinking the same thing I was. I remember pegboards and the carbon paper, and you get black stuff up your arms and on your hands every day. So yes, pegboards were a mastery back then for us.
They've been around since '48, and believe it or not, I have my own primary care provider I see today, internal medicine, she uses a pegboard system?
I had a client, it was about 10 years ago in Chicago in, a little bitty office, and I went in and they were still using pegboards. So Pam also commented that people don't know what pegboards are, probably some of the listeners. And I already had lady who said, yep, she's she's one of them. So pegboards before we had computers and it was the way that they would we would get patients to sign out and show what was on their accounts and things like that. So they would have Don, since you sold them, you could explain a little better probably than I could with the correct terminology, but
Okay.
we'd have the system with the holes in it, and that's how you'd load it in there. And so go ahead.
Basically, you had a flat piece of cardboard laying there with some little pegs on it, and you had a day sheet that you laid on there that fit into the little pegs, so that way it all lined up. And you had ledger cards that would again line up into that right there. And then you had a super bill, basically a 3 to 4 part form that had all the CPT codes on it, and doctor's name and address on it. And the doctor had checked off what CPT services that he had done, basically when they first started out, the 4-digit codes, so California relative value codes. And then whenever you left, after you paid the doctor would give you 2 receipts, 2 of the sheets of the 3-page pegboard, super bill, and one of those you got to keep as your receipt, and the other you'd tear off and attach to a claim form that you completed yourself and sent off to the insurance company, so the insurance company would reimburse you.
Yeah, back then in the day, we didn't really do a lot of submission of claim forms. Patients did it themselves, and they would just attach their receipts with it. And that's why we had, moved in when we had computers into encounter forms that, again, we would give patients. So now if you still get encounter forms at your offices, you're not really expected. In fact, most patients just have stacks of them because they have no idea what to do with them anymore because nobody files their own insurance. But yes, that was the pegboard system that we used to use in order to keep our flow with the patients. And they paid us at the time of service, not insurance companies, because back then, no PPOs, no HMOs, and life was just beautiful. So it was much easier on our side back then.
It wasn't until about 1991 whenever doctors started enrolling in the programs with the insurance companies and started joining it, and the insurance carriers started saying, well, we want you to file the claims to the patients.
Yep.
Which makes a lot of sense from the insurance company standpoint because they can regulate the doctors.
Yep.
They can educate the doctors as to what needs to be on there instead of the patient sending in anything, receipts from the CVS or the children's drawings, whatever they were sending in. I'll fill out with a crayon. Okay, that works.
Yeah. And when the charts were all in paper and all handwritten with the squigglies all over it, and you spent your days trying to decipher things. So, but here, interesting, Pam made a comment which leads into our discussion for today. She said it was back in the day when the contract was between the patient and the insurance company. And that is the whole crux of the point of why I wanted you to come on, because a lot of people mistakenly have the same idea that Pam does, that the contract is between the physician's office and the insurance company.
And correct. The matter is, Pam was more right about being where we are today, because today the contract is still between the patient and the insurance company. The doctors think that they have a contract that somehow overrides the contract that the patient has, but they don't.
Right. Which leads us to what I wanted to talk about, which is Erisa. And Erisa is the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, which, looking at it by its name, and I also want to tell you that I spent my weekend doing a little reading. This is one of Don's books. And I'll put up his website and email information here if y'all want to go check it out. He has written a great book called The Unfiltered Guide to Erisa for Medical Providers. It's a short book, but it's packed with a whole lot of information. And I love your writing style too, Don. You know, and my flabber was not gasted because I was understanding of what was going on, but I love your style of writing. So,
So much.
but with Erisa, oh, I'm sorry.
I said I appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, with Erisa, you know, the protections for Erisa are for the employees, as it says, benefit. And so people, because it has the retirement word in it, think that it has nothing to do with, you know, insurance and physicians' offices and patients, and in that manner that Erisa can be really used. Do you find that yourself to be true, that when you mention it, they're like, well, that's supposed to be about retirement, it doesn't have anything to do with us?
Exactly. They got a total, you know, look of bewilderment on their face, like, what?
Yeah, yeah. So with Erisa, what's in the act gives them protection for their benefits, and getting insurance from their employer is one of their benefits. It's something when people talk about, like when you go, anybody that's watching, when you go to apply for a new job or you get interviewed or you're talking about things, they always talk about their package, their benefits package.
Mhm.
And insurance is always something, or for those that offer it, you know, it's something in the package. So it's a benefit to you. So it's an employee benefit. And a lot of patients and people don't think about it that way, but it's actually, you know, a benefit. So that's where it kind of backs into Erisa, correct?
Exactly. In fact, I like to surmise it and say, whenever somebody goes to work, let's say when Pam went to work for somebody, they offered her a certain salary. They said, okay, this is going to be your vacation. This is going to be your 401k. This is going to be, we're going to offer you health insurance, dental insurance, vision insurance, pet insurance, but probably not pet insurance. But, you know, that entire thing becomes your employment compensation package. And as such, it all falls under the control of the United States Department of Labor. The same people who says you can't work a high school student beyond 10:30 at night, which somebody's not told the theater where my grandson works, because sometimes they're working till 11:30 on a school night. Or you can't, you must give employees breaks at certain times of the day, and they must give them an hour lunch break if they're working more than 7 hours or 8 hours, whatever it is. All of that falls under the DOL. And so does the actual insurance claims that you're filing. And people get totally lost about that when I start talking about that.
Yeah, yeah. Now, for everybody watching, I made a couple banners of things which Don touches on in his book, and that kind of brings out, hopefully will bring out these points of Erisa of how it can help a physician's office in getting paid correctly, getting their money that they deserve. So first, my question is what Pam kind of alluded to. Where did it go? So for my listeners, whose claim are you submitting at your practice? Whose claim do you think that is when you send it out?
Yeah, if we were to ask, and I don't know how many, if there's ways for everyone to apply under the chat area, but whose claim do you think it is whenever you go to a doctor and you have the doctor's office file a claim? Is it your claim or is it the provider's claim? Is there a way to see what their answers are?
Yes, there is. I can see there. If you look on the right side of your screen, Don, do you see a little button that says comments at the top?
I see a chat area, but
yours says chat.
Uh-huh.
If you click on that, you should be able to see everybody's comments.
Oh, comments. Okay, here we go. Comments. Here we go.
So Kathy,
I'm sorry.
That's all right. Kathy says patient and Shannon says patients. And that's the correct response we're looking for, right? And that's the important part of Erisa that you keep pounding on in the book, that it's the patient's claim, right?
Exactly. It's always the patient's claim. It is never the medical provider's claim, a hospital's claim. And that's where a lot of people have trouble understanding that.
Because they've got a contract with the insurance company too. And so to them, it's equating to their claim being sent in. but it's the patient's claim. So if you keep that in your mindset when you're looking at things, it'll help you get along with how the ERISA things will help. So, but the first thing is that ERISA doesn't apply to everybody, right?
Exactly.
But it applies to a lot more than you think, right? So my next question for people would be, what would not be an ERISA claim? Can anybody think of something or put in your comments what you think is not an ERISA claim? And there's about a 5-second delay here. So if I don't see something pop up, okay, good. Kathy says federal, which is probably the largest part that's not ERISA. You know,
Yeah.
so the government, right? So if you work for the government, and it's not ERISA.
Or let's say that somebody went and got a claim on the marketplace, the Obamacare marketplace. Now, that could be ERISA, like whenever my wife and I got a Blue Cross claim from there. I made sure that the premiums were paid for by Don Self and Associates Incorporated, who's my employer.
Yep.
And that-
Same here.
Pardon me?
So that's the same here. That's how I did it.
Exactly.
So yeah. Oh, and somebody caught one of the other ones, the church.
Exactly. If it's a church employer, so the pastor at our Baptist church, he has insurance through the church with his family. It's not ERISA because the employer is the government of the church.
These guys are good. What about workman's comp, Don?
Workers' comp is definitely not, because workers' comp is protecting the employer, not the employee.
So then if all of those things are not, what then would be ERISA?
About 84% of the commercial claims that you file every day are ERISA. So anybody working at any of the following of the 6 million civilian employees, companies in the country, including your company, or Don Self and Associates, or Telecare, or Target, Walmart, Amazon, Federal Express, Lowe's, Home Depot, Kroger. I mean, we just go down the line. Just anybody working for another company that's not government or church, either one.
So, thinking as y'all are sitting there too, listening, that this applies, or these techniques can be applied to 80 to 90% maybe of your patient base, depending on what your patient base is, right? So it can cover a large part of things that it can help you with and assist you with in getting paid. What I found interesting was your verbiage too, and something that when we talk in insurance and you talk at webinars, seminars, all of us in the industry, when we talk about things, we always talk about denials coming in. And in ERISA terms, they call these ABDs instead, right? Yes. So what is the official term for, what does the ABD stand for?
Adverse benefit determination.
So with that would be what we call denial, but it also could be, when they do the investigational experimental thing, which I love, they kind of, pull that one out sometimes. Which is something I have seen happening more and more lately, is when they downcode your claim. So they didn't outright deny it. So technically it's not a denial, but it is an ABD because they didn't pay according to the fee schedule that you have.
But
correct?
On the claim that you billed.
For every line item.
Exactly. Let's say you build out 7 line items and they deny the venipuncture, 1 line item. That makes the whole claim an ABD.
And that's what we're kind of looking at is what to do with those ABDs and depending on what kind you get. Now, the one part I found interesting in your book that I think might give listeners practices the most pause or the most thought of, oh gosh, this is going to be the giant headache here, is your suggestion for you to determine what's going on and whether or not that is paid correctly according to their policy is that you have to have
the patient's policy.
the policy. So I think that's the big crux with a lot of people that when they start thinking about this and talking about this is just like, how are we going to tell our patients that we need copies of their policies, and how do we get all those policies? And most of our patients don't even have their policies or don't know they have their policies. So there could be some legwork at the beginning going into it, right?
Exactly. But see, people,
Full transparency, as everybody says nowadays.
exactly. And how do you get a copy of the policy? And I always tell everybody the same thing. No matter if you're looking at New English Version or King James Version or any version of the Bible, you look up at Matthew 7:7 and it says, ask and thou shalt receive. So ask. And if the patient said, well, why do you need it? I want to make sure the insurance company is going to pay your claim properly so we don't have to bill you for something they should be paying for. So where do I get it? You get it from your employer. And again, you ask. Well, how do I ask them? You call Health and Human Relations and say, I need a copy of my policy. Is it online? If so, let me have a link to it. And they have to give it to you. In fact, they have to give it to you within 30 days, or they're going to be fined $110 a day dated back to the original date of request.
And that's one way, just as with the physician practices, how you get sometimes your physicians and other providers to pay attention. Those of us on the consulting side is, to tell them how it affects the pocketbook. It's the same, here with the payors, when you're dealing with them and the patients, especially when you're trying to enlist their help. Sometimes patients expect that somebody else magically does everything for them, and they are washed of responsibility. So to remind the patients that, their responsibility is to this office that they've come into, and they're responsible for their bills. So if they want to assist you with it, you'll be happy to do those things. But, they can't just kind of lay back and say, all right, y'all handle everything. And if you don't get paid, well, you just have to write it off. Well, that's not exactly how it works, right?
Exactly.
Because again, it's the patient's policy with the insurance company. So what I found most interesting, and again, to get people into understanding where I was coming from as I'm reading through everything and thinking about Erisa. So you get a payment, and the payment isn't correct, and so the physician's office, the practice, has a couple ways they could go. One is to go back to the payor with the Erisa information, and the second is to go to the patient, right?
Exactly. Right.
And so that's where, you taking that easy road, though, if you're patient centric, if you enlist the patient's assistance and can get it, you can set up templates, in your practice for these things. Because once you have the information, you have the information, right? And so from there, you, just like they use templates for the EHR and for all the different things they're doing, you can also, and from being in that practice side of it for many years, I know we had templates for a lot of the stuff before we had big computer systems that did everything. We made our own, right? So we would have because you didn't want to redo it every single time. So you made templates for the different situations. Then you just plug in the patient's name and policy information, all that kind of stuff in there, and go along your merry way with it. So there is some upfront time that needs to be put in from an office. But once it's done, and you can continually use these templates over and over and over. And you have templates in your book that you go through with different scenarios, let's say, with insurance payors for different things. And, when they talk about medical necessity, that is that's another big one. So I think the down-coded and the medical necessity are probably two of the biggest reasons that we see that patients are, or that practices are getting ABDs or denials. Is that what you're finding?
I'm finding those as well as bundling issues where we're finding out where they're saying this is bundled into something else because they may not be following the NCCI edits. They may be using up their own edits that they created or something created by someone else. Or it could be we're getting denials because they've already paid the claim and now they're asking for money back. But that's a whole nother area.
Yeah, oh, that I think is one of the really good ones. And I want to talk about them asking for a take back, but I wanted to show a couple comments from Pam again.
Okay.
Pam is a big fan of yours, it seems. And she says she loves Erisa, how it protects the patients when appealed correctly. For the providers. Unfortunately, most providers don't understand that they need to appeal, which is another whole separate issue. I have been in a lot of larger practices where I will go in and I'm doing a consultation and I've seen things in just the stacks and I'm like, what is all this stuff? And they're like, oh, those are the denials. And they just, and I'm like, they're magically it's not going to get any better if you keep staring at it. It's just going to keep growing, but so that's the thing is having those personnel and the people that are knowledgeable of Erisa and how to use it and the tactics to do. But Pam's asking a question here for you. If we go to the patient and they refuse to assist, how do you recommend handling the incorrect balance?
You bill the patient. Plain and simple. It's real simple. You said, I have an agreement with the insurance company that they say I can't bill the patient. Well, is that part legal if the insurance company is not paying the claim properly? No. See, a lot of times we think everything in that agreement that the providers may have with the insurance company applies. And they do apply for that highway patrol officer coming in or that priest from the local archdiocese or whatever. But they don't apply for the person coming in that works at Walmart or Exxon or Mobil or CVS Pharmacy. Because in that one, they're required to follow the patient's policy according to Erisa.
Oh, and she brings out your example for your venipuncture. So Aetna bundles venipuncture with every other service, that they're doing.
And that's illegal. It's illegal.
And that's, go ahead.
On that, by the way, too, if you just approach it the right way. But most people in this business, they try to approach it through the claims department rather than going to who they should be talking to.
And who do you say that is, Don?
The CEO of the insurance company or the legal department. It'd be like me walking into Walmart and seeing the greeter at Walmart saying, hey, welcome to Walmart. I like your cowboy hat. Have a good day. And me saying to them, hey, I want you to lower the price on the TV by 50% because you're charging too much. And I'll buy a TV. And that greeter would look at me, welcome to Walmart is all they taught me. I'm sorry, I don't have the power. And the same thing, the claims department people may be wonderful people. They might be coders and billers and grandmas and, wonderful people. But they don't understand Erisa, so they don't have the right to be able to make any decisions regarding Erisa. So you go to either the CEO or the plan administrator, and every policy has a plan administrator.
Yes.
And that plan administrator's name, personal name, and their address and their phone number is in the patient's policy. You only see that
because they have to give it.
I'm sorry?
They have to give the patient a way to contact if they have questions or concerns.
Exactly, and that's what their job is to make sure that the claims are paid properly so the employer doesn't get into trouble. Because the employer is the one going to get in trouble when the insurance company like Aetna bundles things they're not supposed to. Aetna and the employer will get in trouble.
So when they are sending these letters, and again, I'm going to, let's see, we're talking about the bundling right now, right?
Sure, yes, ma'am.
So speaking of, again, out of your book, He's from the templates that are in there, they're from the common things that people are getting denials or ABDs on. And, so you look at the improper bundling ABD template. And as an example, he also gives you the CFR, the Code Federal Regulations. So the specific verbiage where you're pointing to in your appeal or in your letter to the CEO or the insurance, claims division, that you are saying that, that you are in violation basically of the CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations, and you want the name, you want the credentials of the people that looked at it, you want their coding and bundling policy, because in the patient's policy, these things are in there and they're part of the Erisa Act of
Yes.
things that have to be given to the patient upon their request, which is the name and credentials of the person that looked at it. They have to be given the right to see all this information. So once the patient signs your
Assignment of benefit form.
assignment of benefits letter, you have the right to do that on behalf of the patient, so they don't have to do it, and so they don't have to pay you. And that's how you explain it to the patient. We'll do the battle for you. You just have to give us the ammo. So so you're telling them the fact that they're in violation of these things. And if you don't comply with what you're supposed to and with what you agreed to do for this patient, then we are going to maybe turn you into EBSA, which would bring in my next thing, which was, so Don, what is EBSA?
Employee Benefit Security Administration.
And what can they do?
EBSA can find not only the insurance company, but they can find the employer. Now stop and think about it for just a second, how much power that gives you. Because the one person or the one entity that the insurance company does not want to get into trouble is the employer. Because if the employer gets in trouble, they're not going to renew that contract with Aetna, United Healthcare, Blue Cross, Anthem, Centene, whoever it may be. Because just think about it. If Walmart got into trouble, what would that cost Blue Cross Blue Shield? If they said, no, we're not going to renew the contract. Or if Amazon did, that would end up costing them a huge amount of money because, Amazon's not going to renew the contract if they get into a huge fine by the federal government.
I certainly wouldn't, right?
And that's your power.
That's the thing. It's knowing those things. I mean, so many offices just aren't really aware of those kinds of issues, and that they have these things and this protection for the patients. Because the government, as you said, they stepped up and did something for the people. For once in one of these acts, it's actually very helpful for us. But the practices just have to learn how to use it. And in that template, when I would send these out, I agree with Don too, that when you were writing it, because when I used to, back in the day, when I used to do appeals and things like that, I always CC'd the patient and I always CC'd the employer. So make sure when you send these letters that you CC the employer, you CC the federal bureaus that you're talking about, and tell them that the thing is, put that in their head to show them that, yes, these are things, and yes, you're aware of what the patient's rights and the policy states, and that, you'll be surprised at how quickly you get a check, right?
Really, amazingly, how quickly. I got a letter from one office manager up there just outside of Chicago. She sent an email one day because she had gotten the email address of United Healthcare CEO, and she followed my advice, sent it. The very following day, she gets a call from their office apologizing. And it makes that much of a difference because they know that most people don't have a clue on this stuff. And some people say, well, you can't talk to the CEO of the insurance company. Sure you can. They put their pants on one leg at a time like all the rest of us do.
Yep. Yep. So some questions here. We have a question from Kathy. It says, what's the worst thing that could happen if you don't have the patient's policy and file under ERISA other than the time to prepare the claim?
Okay, let's talk about that. When you say file under ERISA, that kind of makes people, sometimes it makes people think, well, you're going to file the claim to somewhere else than the normal place you file it to. No, you're still filing it to the same place, still filing it to the same insurance company, same address, same clearinghouse, etc. It's just if they don't pay, then you're going to use the threat of ERISA to make them pay the proper way. So what's the worst thing that can happen? Because sometimes I'll have patients tell me, or providers tell me, I don't have the patient's policy. That's okay. You already know what ERISA says, and so you're basically still going to do the same thing. I want to know, and you have 30 days to apply, or you can be fined by the courts. Who was it that made that adverse benefit determination? Who is it that, what policy did they use in the office? If you used an outside consultant, who was it? Or if
Yep.
you're doing, one of the other, because I think there's like about 6 different letters in there,
Mm-hmm.
including if the insurance carriers has already recouped, how to get the money back from the insurance companies.
Yep. There's the carrier previously recouped letter.
Yep.
I have that one. Yep. And that's another big one too about them coming back and trying to do takebacks because, in fact, I used this this year for a practice that was getting some takeback requests and saying, well, we're just going to start taking it out of your check. And I was like, no, you're not, because technically, and again, I'm asking so that you can, if an insurance company were trying to take back and you were not, you paid the claim, they paid it correctly. Now you want the money back and you're not going to give it back to them. And they threaten to take it from future checks, which is what they always do. They say, we'll just start taking it back then. What is wrong with them trying to do that?
Well, first off, it's against the federal law for them to do it. United States Supreme Court on 3 different occasions, dating back to 2002, 2006, 2016, has ruled every single time if they want the money, they have to go back to the patient and get it, not the medical provider. Interestingly, just yesterday, I had another consultant out there in the field say, okay, one of my clients got this letter about here, and he sent me a phrase out of the letter. It said, and it was like two different paragraphs right here, and it said, under this court law right here, the court said that a request and a demand for a refund is not an adverse benefit determination. You cannot use ERISA to appeal it, and blah 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 blah. And then most people would sit there and say, wow, I guess that I was wrong, and they'll believe that. But what they don't understand is attorneys and insurance companies, a lot of times, they figure if they throw enough against the wall, they're going to make you believe something that they're saying, even though it may be totally off subject. So if you go look up that specific, by the way, court case that they were referencing there, it was totally different than what they were representing. It had nothing to do with the fact that you do not have to refund them. But they know that 90% of people are not going to go look it up, including healthcare attorneys. But I'm one of the people that goes and looks it up.
Well, yeah, if they're trying to take my money back from me, I'll definitely want to see what I'm going to go check out what they're saying. And there was, so that's a thing when you're doing the letters back for that instance. That's one of the things you definitely want to mention is that the Supreme Court has held that this can't be done because you're not taking the money back from that patient at that point. You're taking it back from somebody else's benefit. So you're like robbing Peter to pay Paul. You can't do that.
It's like the letter, the letter you've got there. It may say on there, okay, hey, CEO, you've already taken money back from one patient because you say a different patient owed you the money. I wanted to put in the letter, surely you can't be that stupid, but I decided to be a little bit more politically correct, and I say, surely you're aware of ERISA law. If not, you need to look it up, and you will find what you did was illegal. Literally illegal, meaning against federal law. You have 10 days to pay that money back to the provider. Otherwise, we will report this to the feds. And not only you, but the employer is going to get in trouble. The clock is ticking 10 days, my friend. And I do give them, by the way, the actual Supreme Court decision in there.
Yes.
And I give them a reference to Pennsylvania Chiropractic Association versus
Yep. Blue Cross.
Blue Shield. And that because that's when Blue Cross Blue Shield got fined $350 million. So they didn't get fined. They had an agreement to pay back $350 million because they were afraid of how much more the fines would be if they didn't.
Exactly. And that's where, and so I've always stood behind the idea that whole knowledge is power thing. And the more those things, as you get those letters and, these kind of things from the insurance companies, that you'll understand that, they're not always, I don't want to say lying, but they're not always correct.
Exactly.
Whether that be purposely correct or ignorantly, ignorance on their part, but they're always seem to be benefiting their side. So, if you have the proper tools and the proper knowledge, then you can fight these kinds of things. And, it's just getting the setup done. You just need to set the office up. So you have to take the time to do that, to, get Don's book, look up different stuff on Erisa to where you have those kinds of things to where you can start building, use his templates as a jumping off point for your own templates if you want to put them in a different kind of spin or whatever. But you'll be surprised at how quickly you will start getting that payment back. Because with that case I had, I said, well, if you want that money back, you need to go back to the patient, take it from them, because it's their policy with you. And the issue was done. They didn't want to discuss it any longer. So, I took care of it.
Exactly. Most of the time, that's exactly what happens. Once in a while, they'll come back and argue and say, no, this is not Erisa. Your contract supersedes Erisa. I find that one absolutely hilarious. You mean my signature is somehow more powerful than Gerald Ford, who signed this into law? I'm sorry, my signature is not that powerful.
So some comments we have coming into, Pam as asking about a sample of an AOB that gives the practice the right to appeal. That is also in your book, correct?
It
is.
I
remember looking at those.
Most practices, what they're doing is they would take a couple of lines off of a claim form, lines 12 and 13, and a box of 12 and 13 or a claim form saying, I hereby assign benefits and release of information to patient so-and-so. And that's great for just asking for them to send you the check. But it doesn't give you legal standing in federal court to be able to represent that patient as an Erisa representative. That's why I give you a complete one that's been used time and time again. It was developed by Dr. Jen Zhao. Dr. Jen Zhao is the godfather of Erisa in my mind, and the one who taught me. And he's
wonderful.
Share it. And Jen was a chiropractor just outside of Oak Brook, Illinois. And he's the one who was taught quite a few people Erisa, but Jen was difficult to understand at times, to put it mildly. Jen was originally from China, had a very strong Chinese accent, obviously. And I want you to imagine, Betty, for just a moment, the most hyperactive person you know that's taken a drink of 5-hour energy and a cup of both. And that was Jen. Oh, the doctors are stupid. The doctor not know what's going on in the insurance carriers. All the insurance carriers go to hell, and Obama's going to save us, keep us all out of trouble right here, because the doctors got to become educated on this right here. And that was him teaching. And I went to his 4-day class up there, and if you don't mind me telling you the story.
Certainly.
I went to the class and came back home, back to Texas after this 4-day class, and I said, there's something to it. I've got to learn more. This was back in 1998. And I told my wife, I'm going to go back up to Chicago and do this class again. And I contacted Jen and said, oh, Don, you come back. I confused you the first time. So this time I make sure I not charge you. I no charge you. You come back. So I flew back up there. He met me at the airport and he said, you on a small plane? I said, yes, I'm on a little Cessna 182 I have. He said, you take me up. So I flew him around Chicago, let him take the yoke. And this 40-something-year-old was just like a child. He was so getting to fly the plane. That second week, it hit me. I got it. I understood it. But where Jen, bless his heart, was more knowledgeable than I will ever be on it, especially every line item of every law regarding it. He was confusing people, and God's given me the ability to help simplify things because I'm a simple person and I need things to be simple for me to understand it. So I try to simplify it for you. And so I credit everything I do to Jen Zhao. We lost Jen back in late 2016 due to cancer. But anyway, so I still give him total credit on this.
That's a great story. And it's always nice, to hear those things about where people base their stuff off of and, how it evolves. So that's good. Lady makes a good point too. Even though we're talking about Erisa and what Erisa can do, she used some of the, kind of things about asking about the person who did it and stuff. When she did an appeal with a Medicaid claim, she requested them to provide the name and the credentials of the person who reviewed the denial, and then magically, it got paid. So
yep, it works.
Sometimes it's just about knowing the questions to ask. And I've had people, and I've had done that too when I've been defending, take back requests for providers or audits, things like that. When I've said, okay, well, put up your auditor, let's have a sit down, we'll do a conference, we'll figure this out. And then all of a sudden they, can't come up with the person, or they can't, so sometimes I think there are those automated types of things that go on, and, you start to question, and then, well, our auditor, and then you ask about the auditor, and then, they don't have, some good responses for that, or it's not a person that should be doing audits that, can't defend, because I do ask about their credentials, and that's where they start to fall away sometimes. So, you're allowed to ask.
With an LVN denying something done by a surgeon, really? You're going to tell me the LVN saying there's no medical necessity, and I've got a doctor who's been doing this 28 years?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. That is, and I think Kathy, she added on to the question she asked before about they don't really have a copy of the policy. She said, other than to prepare appeals. And she says, what's the worst they can do is say no.
Exactly. That's all.
And once you have the template set up, you're not talking about spending hours doing this. You're talking about switch the names out, boom, it's off your desk. So you're talking about something that might take you less than a minute to do, and be able to bring that payment rightfully back to the practice.
I'll give you a perfect example, Betty. Don't ever be afraid of getting the answer no. Back when I was selling super bills, a no just got me that much closer to the next yes. When I was in high school, even though I was a geek, I had more dates than most jocks did because there wasn't a girl in high school I didn't ask. I got used to those, but every once in a while I get a yes.
And that's all it takes.
Yeah. And all of that any repercussions to the providers. They can't do anything to the provider about this. Because
that's a great question. And I think that prevents a lot of them too. They're afraid to ruffle the feathers of the payor. Do you find that to be true?
I do. And it's a fear that they shouldn't have, because it's the insurance companies cannot do that, because that would be a violation of Erisa also.
To do anything retaliatory, correct?
Exactly.
So yeah, it's what I have found also is that when you do those things, what happens is not that they get all huffy and try to get you back or anything, is that they realize that you understand, and then magically that practice's payments don't get messed with, is what I have found.
The exact same thing, because I totally agree with you there. I've got clients that we would have to appeal on Erisa, and we appeal, and after a while they stop getting any denials because the insurance company says, we'll go after the 95% of people that's ignorant about Erisa and leave that one alone, just pay their claims.
Exactly. So I've always said, the fight is worth having, because what ends up happening is, it starts to lessen. When I used to, when I would consult with certain physicians, sometimes every time I would tell them something, I would always give them all of the documentation. I would say, here's this and here's it. And so I'd send them with these booklets home full of stuff that would tell them why. I said, I'm not just giving you my opinion. This is why you have to do it this way. And here's my proof. And then after I do that for about 3 or 4 times, I would tell them and I'd say, do you want, oh, no, that's okay. You said it. I know, that's okay. We'll just do it. So once they know, then it makes it easier and, things run smoother. You don't get messed with as much and they know that you're on to the game as everybody keeps talking about it. Right. And your claims start to get paid nicely and correctly, and you don't have these kinds of issues like you are having currently.
Amen. You got that exactly right. I agree with you.
So Charmaine was nice enough, because I was going to put it up, but Charmaine put, here is Don's site where you can get his book, the book that I'm discussing today, and it's called The Unfiltered Guide to Erisa for Providers, and you just updated it, right, to the 2021?
That's a 2021 version right there as well. Thank you, Charmaine. It's good to see her.
I like Charmaine a lot. She comes to a lot of my stuff. And so Don, let me go back over to my banners here. Don's email is donself@donself.com, right?
And I know people are probably thinking, man, he has got donself.com, and I used to have 888 donself as my phone number. How egotistical is this guy? I got to tell you, Betty, years ago, I had a doctor come up to me at a convention and say, I was going to hire you last year, but I didn't remember the name of your company. And I didn't remember what town in Texas you were in, so I couldn't find you. I came home from that convention. I said, we're changing the name of the medical consultants of the USA to Don Self and Associates. And told my wife, and that's what we did. And that's when I changed. We got the website in '94 to that. And that's just the way we've been. So I'm not nearly as egotistical as it sounds.
That makes it easy for people. That's good. And somebody else. Jessica says she loves telling insurance reps to read their own policies.
You'd be surprised how many patients and people working in this field never even read their own policies. But you're right.
Yep.
I love that, Jessica. Great.
All right. Well, Dawn, I thank you. I know some people are starting to have to jump off because we've kind of gone over because of our beginning thing. But I want to thank you for coming on today. And I know you speak on a bunch of different things, like your remote patient monitoring, things like that too. So maybe soon I could have you back on. If you would like to come back on, I'd love to have you.
I would love to. I'd love to talk about how few doctors are using the 2021 E&M rules in their office, and they're spending way too much time documenting more than they have to under the 2021 rules. Or I'd love to talk about monitoring, whatever I can do to help you and your viewers. Betty, I'm here, whatever. And again, I so much apologize for missing it at the beginning of this.
That's all right. But what I did do, I know Thursday we have Thanksgiving, which is why we're doing the special Tuesday edition. So I just pulled a couple little things that I thought were kind of cute off the internet there. We have the little turkey asking if, have you tried tofu? I hear it's really good. And I like this one. So it says, something's going on. The farmer just unfriended me on Facebook.
That's cute.
And then another one where the turkeys are all talking and somebody said, what are you thankful for? And the other turkey says, vegetarians.
There you go.
And then finally, again, I hope y'all have a happy Thanksgiving. So gobble till you wobble, I thought was very, very fitting. So I like that one. But thanks for hanging out with us today. And Don, thank you for joining me. And I'd be very, very, very pleased and honored to have you back as a guest. We'll work it out later. So everybody have a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Have a blessed one. Enjoy your family.
Thank you. And thanks for joining us on this edition of Healthcare Happenings. And join us next time. Say happy Thanksgiving to the puppy. And where you will come to find out what's happening in healthcare. Thanks, y'all.
Bye-bye.